For this, after creating our scales here, we can create an x-axis by calling a special function we have to import from d3. And that's the axis bottom method here. We import this from d3. And then here we create the x-axis by calling axis bottom. Now to axis bottom, we can pass our x scale. So we pass this x constant, this scale function, to axis bottom, and internally, d3.js will be able to pull all the information it needs to render an axis out of this scale. So the different labels, for example, which are our category texts here, the position of the axis ticks, all of that can be pulled out by d3 here by passing in this axis function. Now this axis also needs to be added, and therefore in the constructor, I'll create a new element that should hold the axis. On my SVG element, I'll append another group. And I want to store this in a property just as we stored the bar container, for example. And therefore here I'll add the axis property, which is of type selection, which holds a SVG element, and the rest is all any as before. And then here we simply store our newly created group in this axis property. And this axis property will now be connected to this axis we generated here. We do that by calling this axis, referring to that property we just worked on, call, which is another method we can execute, another command, and this basically makes sure that d3 creates this axis and attaches it to this axis here in our SVG code. Now if you save that and you reload, you will indeed see an axis, but it's in the wrong place. It's on top of everything and it should be below the bars. The reason for that is that our coordinate system starts in the top left corner. So to push the axis down, we actually have to add an attribute to it here after call. And that's the transform attribute, where we then pass in another string, actually with backticks instead of single quotes. So these are not single quotes, these are backticks. And then between that, you pass in translate, like this. It's all in a text, in such a special backtick text to be precise. Translate 0, and then $sign and curly braces to inject something dynamic into the text. And that dynamic thing will be our height. This in the end is just a command that translates, that pushes or moves the element down in this case by the height of the chart. Now if I save that and reload, the axis is therefore gone. And the reason for that simply is that now it is below our chart, but it's cut off because it was pushed down the entire height and therefore it's not visible anymore. It's below the chart now. Now to fix this problem on the height here, by which I move down my axis, I'll reduce this by, let's say, 20, so that I don't push it down the entire height, but just the entire height minus 20. If we save that, we end up with this result here. But now, of course, the axis is inside of our bars, so we also need to reduce the height of the bars, and that's something we can achieve here when we set up the scales. There, on the y-axis, I'll deduct 20 from height as well, and also do the same down there where I calculate the height of my bars. Also deduct 20 here. So that everything is a bit shorter. And with that, if we reload, the axis is right below the bars. Now with that, we created a basic custom visual with our own data and our own axis. And under the hood, all those built-in visuals and all the custom visuals you get from the marketplace and so on, in the end work like this under the hood. Now, of course, there's way more you can add, way more you can configure. You can accept your own options, and you can fine-tune this. You can basically do a lot of things here since you got full control over the code. But this, of course, is not a Power BI developer custom visual course. It's about Power BI itself. I just wanted to get you started with visuals, with custom visuals, and give you a look under the hood of visuals and what's going on there. Now, you might never create your own visuals, but I always think it's interesting to see what's happening inside of a tool. And well, that is what's happening here. Now, with that, of course, I also want to show you how you can package your visual so that you can share it with others, that you could share it in the marketplace, and so that you can also use it outside of Power BI's service. Development is only possible here because we need this connection to our development server. But you can use your custom visual also in Power BI Desktop. But for this, you first of all need to share it, and that's what we're going to do in the next lecture.